What's up, guys? I'm Niclas for Chess24, and I'm obviously trying to imitate Jan's introduction here. So, what's going on today? Game of the day was Wesley against Anish from Bilbao Masters 2016. So let's get right into it. First of all, let's check out the score of those two players against each other with this beautiful little cartoon. Wesley against Anish, they played 12 times, and Giri is having a tiny lead, has one more game against Today, Wesley with the white pieces starting out with e4. And curiously, they repeated the same opening from their first encounter in this tournament, because they play against each other twice with each color. The same Italian and also the same move here, 6 rook e1, which is a rather rare move. The main moves are c3, h3, knight bd2, but rook e1 is a different try. It allows, though, black immediately to play knight g4. So in this position with the black piece in the first leg of the tournament played a6, which is also a very natural move to allow the bishop to retreat to a7 later on. But knight g4 is very concrete, and Anish Giri, as always, was excellently prepared. Rook e2, and now king h8, stepping out of the c4 g8 diagonal and preparing f5, which black even played after h3, just leaving the knight on g4 on prise. If white was to take on g4, which didn't play, he played knight c3, then black would give up quite a strong attack, in fact. Here on the f-file, and g3 is an idea. One sample line could be knight g5, queen f6, getting another piece into the action. If now knight f7, then rook takes f7, bishop takes f7, and g3 already. And the ideas like queen h4, queen h2, and black is having a nice initiative. Also after f5, another move to consider maybe is e takes f5, but here black can take on f2 first, play d5, and take on f5, take the rook on f2 later on. It's also quite a complex position. And so rather quickly played knight c3, which is why we're thinking he had prepared or at least analyzed this line as well. But after knight f6, he sank into deep thought. Maybe he only expected d6, which is also a move. But knight f6, of course, seems to be a more natural of the two, not leaving the knight being attacked anymore on g4. Here, white cannot take on g4 still. Very good attack for black. And also this is quite interesting. Bishop takes g4. Black's also having some chances here against the white king. Surprisingly to me, just giving up a piece like that. But a lot of the black pieces are participating here, and the white pieces are a little bit awkward. Well, this is a line maybe for another game. Here, Giri just retreated, knight f6, and black has reached already a lot. He has played f5, played knight back to f6, and seems to be fine here. And now, after a long thought, bishop e3. Maybe the more critical move is bishop g5. Now sample line could go d6, knight d5, f takes e4, d takes e4. Now bishop e6 is possible, because after bishop takes f6, black can take with the rook here. Could also take with the pawn, but rook takes f6 is possible because of the knight takes f6, bishop takes c4. Black is hitting the rook on e2, and d5 regains the exchange, and the position looks rather equal to me. Also another line to consider here, which is quite interesting. If knight takes f6 instead of bishop takes f6, bishop takes c4, knight takes h7, it gets a little bit crazy, but with the help of our good friend, the computer, we can figure this out. Bishop takes e2, queen takes e2. rook takes f3, bishop takes d8. And this is lagging a little bit, so I'll turn off the engine for now. Well, then the bar wouldn't move anymore. Decision. Well, we'll see how it goes. Maybe I have to turn something else off here. Hold on, guys. Let me just close something. Probably too many things open. I'll continue a little bit, but I don't want it to be lagging for you. This is bothering me. So, bishop takes d8 here. Black regains the queen after rook takes f2. Queen takes, bishop takes, king takes, rook takes d8, and it leads to an equal position. It seems like the moves come a little bit more smoothly. That's great. Anyways, we're a little bit off track, but bishop g5 seemed to be the move to go to maybe ask some questions, but I'm sure Giri also had prepared all of that. But e3, in fact, it's already white who's a little bit uncomfortable and needs to equalize, in fact. Bishop takes f3, bishop takes e3, and now so took with the pawn. If rook takes e3, once again, just d6, rook e1, queen e8, queen over here to the king side. Just seems comfortable. And black has the option to sometimes close in the center and maybe hope to attack the white king, and also sometimes open the f file. And it's not so clear what white is actually going to do here. After f takes e3, the position is quite different here. Black took on e4 and played d6. Now white has these doubled e-pawns, and there are advantages and drawbacks to them. Of course, they cover a lot of squares. This pawn is especially important to cover f4 and d4. On the other hand, they cannot protect each other, so they are always targets. So the position is a tiny bit more comfortable for black. 3 to take away the b4 square, queen e8, now queen d3. And this seems to be quite an important moment in the game. Here, Giri played the slow move knight d8. But he could have gone for more. He could have played queen g6, a very direct play against the white king. Now, of course, there's the threat of bishop takes h3 first of all, so king h1. And now queen h6. And it's a curious idea that queen steps out of the side to prepare g5, g4. There's not much white can do against this. For example, king g1 here to already step out of the h file, g5, rook f1, g4, takes, and black has a very strong knight on g4 and can probably develop quite a strong attack. And the problem for white is that there's no counterplay really. The center is closed. You cannot open the center, open files in the center. It's difficult to get a queen into play, and black can probably slowly strengthen his position. It's not looking great. Probably white has to try something like knight b5 here, but yeah, this seems difficult. Also similarly, if in this position not king g1 but rook f1, once again knight h5 first, g5 wouldn't be as clear, but threatening knight g3 first, and then g5, and g4 is in the air. This is promising black good attacking chances here. So this was definitely a missed opportunity for Giri because of the knight d8. Now white plays rook f2, and the position is not so exciting. In fact, rook a1 to f1, a6 here. Maybe bishop takes c4 was a little bit more precise. Queen takes c4 and c6, and then putting a knight on f7. Yeah, maybe still a tick, is that even an English word? A tiny bit, that's what I want to say. Better for black, but really not much going on. So instead a6, knight d2, but now the problem is in comparison to taking the c4 bishop one move earlier that Now white could take back with the knight on c4 and improving his knight position a little bit. Giri didn't want to allow this and played b5. But with every pawn move you make on the queen side, you're also weakening some squares and some pawns. So this is giving white some targets. Now, in this phase of the game, actually, both players play very well. Pretty much playing the best moves the whole time. Exchanging rook, c4. White is trying to create some play on the queen side. And black is holding his own. Pushing away the knight on d5. Drawback, of course, the pawn on d6 becomes a little weak. Queen e7. b4, white is grabbing some more space, while black is improving the position of his knight. Knight a5. Queen c7, rook c1, now threatening c takes b5. And the queen moves again to d7. C takes b5, a takes b5. That's why the queen moved out of the way, so white couldn't play knight takes b5 at this point. Would be possible with the queen still on c7. Now a4. And so is trying his best to create some pressure on the queen side and attack these loose pawns here on c6 and d6. And here an inaccuracy by Giri. He took on a4, which allows the white knight to get into play. Maybe rook c8 would have been a possible move. When, well, white can take on b5 but cannot take again because of this. Or the more ambitious but also really, one has to say, crazy move, knight g5 with the point to just sacrifice on h3. But you kind of have to be a computer to do this, because for a human, I don't know. It is pretty crazy. King f2, and now you need to make a move like d5 or just take back on b5. What about rook f8? That would be a huge move to make. But here the king just runs away and white is better. So you need to move like d5, and yeah, this is all craziness really. Like I said, not really a human way of playing. Rook c8, I think, would have been a solid alternative to what Giri did in the game. Because here now the knight comes into play and black is a little bit worse already. Here rook f8 is another inaccuracy. He should play a7 to threaten this pawn and have some pressure on the a file. When white cannot take any of the pawns really, queen takes c6 of course. This ends by queen takes e3, knight takes c6 would blunder the a4 knight. And rook takes c6 would be answered with knight f4 when white cannot keep all those pawns protected. So white should play king h2 here. Oh, excuse me, queen a7, king h2. And white has a little bit of pressure here. Certainly easier for white to play, but there's a lot going on. It's very concrete, a lot to calculate. Anything can happen. All right, rook f8, logical move by Giri, because a lot of the white army is on the queen side right now and not protecting the king on g1. So black wants to initiate counterplay against the king on g1. Now knight b6, queen f7. And here So is actually making his first inaccuracy in a long time in this game. After the opening didn't go too well for him, he really played very well up to this point. When knight takes c6 is not the best choice. Knight bc4 to take on d6 with the knight would have been better. Now, knight e8 is probably the best reply. And here white has a choice. Knight e2, just saving everything here, making sure everything's safe and still having these targets. This is great for white. Or I could also just take on d6. And black is a little bit active here, so I wouldn't be sure about this line. But this might just as well be good for white, unless there's knight h3 here. So I might have blundered this. So the other line, well, maybe white shouldn't take on c6 here right away, but just move the king out of the way first. But the other line also is good, so white has a comfortable choice after knight bc4. But in the game, so missed this opportunity. He played knight takes c6, which allows black to equalize. Knight g. Now threatening the pawn on e4, as well as having other ideas like queen g6 and just getting a little bit closer to a white king. Rook f1 makes a lot of sense to pin on the f-file. And now queen c7. Here queen g6 can be answered by a cute little maneuver. White plays king h2 to defend against the threat of knight takes h3, and after knight takes e4, white defends against the threat of queen g3, but just moving back, and turns out that black is in some annoying here and cannot really continue in any strong way. And white always has this asset of the pawn on b4, passed pawn, supported by the knights. This is pretty good for white. So queen c7 chosen by Giri is good, but here he makes a mistake. He takes on e4 instead. Queen b7, pinning the knight on b6 would have been the way to go. I think he just missed this move, because if you see this move, you're probably going to play it. Suddenly there are threats like knight d7 maybe in a position. Well, not right now with the rooks on the f-file, but it's an option. And white cannot just get out of this pin. It's pretty difficult. Knight a5, just queen takes e4, of course. Black's quite happy. And if rook a1, trying to get the rook into a game, or to even win the queen on b7, black has this reply of knight d7 now. And actually white has to be very careful here, and kind of surprisingly gets out of this, even though all his pawns are on this little square here. Knight a5, hitting the queen. Now queen takes e4, and this is ending up in a perpetual here. So this was a crucial moment here. Giri took on e4, but now white can just play knight d5, and even though the material is equal, white has this asset of the pawn on b4 being a strong force. And here Giri makes another mistake. After that, it really becomes difficult. Here queen f7 needs to be played. If now knight takes f6 like in the game, black can take with the pawn. The difference is that unlike as in the game, white cannot put a queen on the light squares on d5 and c4 here. And black can stabilize the knight on e4 and has some more chance against the white king and is active enough to hold equality. Probably here white should try knight to e7, and then black should opt for an endgame, queen e8. White doesn't have to go into the endgame. It gives him a slight edge, once again, with this passed pawn on b5. But black has good holding chances, I would say, even though this will still be some suffering. All right, so what happened in the game? Queen d7. Now, knight takes f6, g takes f6 is another inaccuracy. I think knight takes f6, but like I said, already here it is not easy for black. White is just going to push this pawn, and difficult task to defend. The problem with g takes f6 is that it just creates more weaknesses. The black king becomes more weak, and the pawn f6 is also a target. Now queen d5 is possible, because the queen is not on f7, right? But on d7, f5 is not possible because white can just pick up this pawn. So the knight has to leave this nice square on e4, and it's looking rather grim for black. Knight a4, b5, knight b6, queen d3, rook g8, e4. Now we've reached the time control 40th move. And let's just take a look at this position. Black has a lot of problems. Targets on d6 and f6 and weak king, whereas white has all trumps, passed b-pawn, nice active knight on c6, safe king, good pieces on the right files. So this is all good news for white. Let's see how this continues. d1, knight d7. Here queen takes d6 would be too early because black could still take on h3 because of this pin. So just, oh, I made the mistake, finally. I was waiting for it. I repeated, so. White played king h2 to defend h3 and threaten queen takes d6. And after knight c5, white has many options. White could also just play queen f3, but so calculated that this endgame is good for him. And he went for it, and indeed it is very good. White is still so active and still has this major asset on b5. Knight c5 to stop the b pawn. Black gives up a pawn on f6, e4, rook f5, and here black played knight b7, but I think the best try still would have been knight d3, when there's still some ideas here, e3, e2, and okay, white can play knight d4, but will be maybe still a little bit tricky to handle this e pawn. One line which is maybe a little bit difficult to calculate, but also comes to mind is rook f7. That's what I was saying. There may be some more chances here for white to miscalculate something or not go for this. But this is a line I would like to show real quick. b6, e3, now rook e7 to exchange rooks. Then both sides queen. And now queen g8. King has to go to f6, otherwise it's mate in 2. Now queen f8 check. King e5. Yeah, and this is a rather long line. It's important that white is able to win here, this pawn on h7. Not directly though, because of queen e5 check in perpetual, but first knight c6. King c3 and queen takes h7, and there's no check. White is up 2 pawns. Black can still play on, of course, but white will take this home. But this is a rather long line to calculate, starting from like this position. So I think would have been a better try. Of course, white can also play like knight d4 here, but at least maybe there are some tricks here. And some more active play, whereas in the game really, after knight b7, white just posts the rook on e5 behind the pawn, and black is just passive, waiting, controls the whole board, now just improves his position, gets the king closer, and here, so found a good way to convert. He played knight f5, calculated everything, and determined that this is just the easiest way. If black goes for the rook endgame, there's no hope. White will sooner or later collect the pawn on e4. Just king e5. Any move, and e6. Well, maybe play rook e6 to stop b6 at least. White just plays rook c5, puts the rook behind the b pawn, for example, and collects this pawn. It's just a matter of time until white converts this. And it's easy too. Knight takes b5 doesn't work because of rook takes, and there's a fork. And Giri tried king f6, but it is all futile here. King f4 simply. Now knight takes b5 was played, rook takes b5, fails g5 check, and rook e6, picking up the knight. So knight takes b5 was his try, but now g5 check, king f7 once again runs into the fork, rook takes b5, and after g6 suddenly there's a mating net around the black king. Rook e7 threatening knight h4, followed by rook takes h7 checkmate. Here he tried rook h8 to defend against this threat, but well, white can renew both threats here by playing king g4, h5 check, and just stepping back, and once again, and if h4, white will complete his little dance, and this is it. Rook e6, king f7, g6, and game over. So Giri resigned after king f4 in this position. That means the first win for Wesley So in the tournament, while Giri takes his second loss in 3 games. Second loss in a row with the black pieces. And rather unfortunate, he had a good opening preparation, as usual one could say. Nice little idea with knight g4 and f5, which has been seen in other situations, but not in this particular line. And then he missed his chance to go queen g6 instead of knight d8 and to initiate an attack against the white king, possibly. And after that, the game was equal for most of the time. And then, yeah, this moment again, not playing queen b7, but Giri took on e4. That made his life very difficult. And then it is an unpleasant position to defend, and Giri didn't manage today. All right, tomorrow the action continues. Bilbao round 9. I hope to see you then. Goodbye.